Month program next Tuesday, October 22nd, as Mac Ice will present I Love to Save the Story, How to Preserve Your Church and Congregational Records. And so that's going to be a special program next Tuesday, October 22nd at noon here in the Farley Auditorium, but it will also be live streamed to our Facebook and YouTube channel. It'll be a slightly longer program than normal, so expect to be here for a little bit over an hour. I'd also like to announce that next Friday, October 25th, will be our third annual Halloween at the Archives. So come enjoy crafts, family-friendly activities, a scavenger hunt, and more from 4:30 until 7 o'clock p.m. Then from 7 to 7:30, we will have a dance party, a costume parade, and a cakewalk out on our front terrace. This event is free to the public, and we invite all people to join us, but especially those with children to come, and we encourage you to wear costumes. A lot of the people here at the Archives will be in costumes, and we love to see people dressed up and excited for Halloween. I'd like to invite you back next month on November 21st as our Food for Thought series continues. It'll be Jamie Reeves speaking about Alabama composers, and he is the, I'm sorry, I'm blanking all of a sudden on the name for the Montgomery Orchestra. The conductor, sorry, that almost got me. The conductor for the Montgomery Orchestra. I would like to thank the Alabama Humanities Alliance for supporting the Food for Thought program and the Friends of the Alabama Archives. Both are sponsors for our programming, and it wouldn't be possible without them. Now to today's program. I am excited to introduce you to Timothy M. Brown, who is the director of the Air Force Historical Research Agency at Maxwell Air Force Base. The agency preserves and provides access to Air Force histories, special collections, lineage, military honors, and heritage. Before becoming a civil servant, Mr. Brown served 23 years on active duty in the Air Force, retiring in 2006. He served as a wing and major command historian, published Air Force histories and studies, served on Air Force history and museum program boards, and received numerous Air Force level awards for excellence. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Oh, good afternoon. Like she mentioned, I am Tim Brown, Director of the Air Force Historical Research Agency, what we lovingly refer to as AFHRA. So you'll hear me throughout this thing calling the agency AFHRA. So thank you for allowing me to come to speak to you today. Before I get started, I want to introduce a few of my team members that I brought with me. Miss Miranda Gilmore, who's the Deputy Director of the Historical Research Agency. Miss Melissa Leahy, who's the Chief of the Research Division. Rebecca Horton, who's our Chief of Digital Curation. Jessica Forsey, who's a historian with our studies and interviews. And Miss Paige Vaughn, who's also with our historian with studies and interviews. So we have a lot in common, but we have some differences as well. But the one thing I can tell you between the Alabama Archives and the AFHRA is we are bound by our passion for history and commitment to history and its preservation. Like you, the Air Force and Space Force stories live with us. That's where they exist. Right up front, I'm going to let you know that typically in the military we use a lot of acronyms. The one I've already mentioned that you're going to hear a lot of is AFHRA, which is who we are. The other one's the Department of the Air Force, and the Department of the Air Force is made up of the Air Force, United States Air Force, and United States Space Force. Real quick, I'm not going to read some of these slides for you because you can read yourselves, but AFHRA, we're at an inflection point. We are navigating a rapidly changing environment. The history and archival landscapes have not only changed, but they continually change. Our mission is to establish the Air Force, where we at? Preserve the past, inform the present, and help transform the future. Our vision is to establish the AFHRA as a valued world-class Air Force and Space Force historical archive. We are the hub of the Air Force History Program. And I'm going to get more to that in a few moments. We have 4 lines of effort for that we are working towards. Operationalize, which is basically making our archives accessible, more accessible than they ever have been before. To do that, we have to modernize. Some of the things we're doing is cloud-based. We want to create a cloud-based archives. It's one of our top priorities. We've actually been working with the ADAH on ways ahead, for example, OCLC on our public-facing fronts. But along with modernizing, we have a lot of stuff that we've got to deal with and to do. For example, our analog. We have Beta, VHS, reel-to-reel, U-matic. And if any of you are familiar with U-matic, U-matic was VHS before there was VHS. It's 1960s, 70s technology. Videotapes that we have. Microcassettes, cassettes, laserdiscs, film, 8mm, 16mm. We're digitizing those things so that we can actually make them cloud accessible. Digitizing our vast repository of microfilm and having those OCR'd. So those are some of the things that we're faced with. 360 million plus pages of paper that we're in the process of digitizing. We can digitize roughly at about 5,000. We have the capability to scan about 5,000 pages a day. If we can get to it. We are also challenged with other things like WordStar, WordPerfect, and those other seemingly ancient file extensions, Microsoft Binder files, that we have got to be able to convert into usable digits that we can get out there for accessibility. The other things that we're doing, and all these lines of effort have connective tissues. The next line of effort we have is developing our workforce to be able to deal with this age that we're working in, the digital realm. Providing the training and tools that they need, historians and archivists both, training and tools that they need to be able to navigate the environment we're in. And then when you put those 3 together, we've basically shaped our Air Force and Space Force repositories to make them accessible and to serve. Again, the landscapes have changed. The speed with which we have to provide information is often measured in hours, maybe a day or two. We refer to this as the speed of relevancy. And what we get at here, and I think what we are in this information consumption period where we want information now. Back in the day, you could take 2, 3, 4 weeks to get something to somebody and it was acceptable. Now, in the military environment, they want it yesterday. I gotta be smarter than the controller. So our program, the Air Force, the field history program is what provides us the histories that we have on file. About 70% of our collection is made up of Air Force histories. The Air Force historians that are out there in the field, these are the memory keepers, the first memory keepers of the DAF. What they produce feeds the Air Force Historical Research Agency, and that's what makes us the hub of the Air Force and Space Force History Program. So you can see here, roughly 234 historians and 41 archivists in the program, 86 duty locations worldwide, 100 emergency essential historians. What that means is that they're deployable. These are historians that are literally, they're at combat wings. Whenever the wing goes somewhere, they typically go with them. They're the ones collecting the documents up front, and you're going to see some of this stuff as we progress through. I can remember back in 1995, and this is kind of one of these digital analog comparisons I'd make for you. In 1995, deployed in support of Balkan operations, I was doing histories, narrative pieces at 30-day intervals, post-document collections. Those collections of documents at that time, I would have about 3 to 4 stacks of 5-foot documents, all paper, and we have to get those back to the AFHRA. Now that is stuff that's coming electronically and it's on a disk. And you think to yourself, when we were back in those times in 95, when we were dealing with paper, we were very selective in the things that we were picking up. All these are primary source documents. So very selective in what we collected. Now with the electronic age, we've got multiple gigs associated with histories, and that would dwarf those piles of documents. So now as historians in the field and provide them to AFHRA, it's like drinking from a fire hose as data. It's just coming at us in waves. So some of the things that we've collected that we do collect as historians that come to AFHRA are the same things that have existed since the 1940s and World War II. We periodically do reviews of our inquiries and identify the things that we are collecting, and are those the right things that we need for the history of the Air Force and Space Forces. So what you see up here is from our Tuskegee collection. And I wanted to show you an example of the things that we collect. Air crew photographs and mission reports. I think if you notice in the upper left-hand corner there is Captain Benjamin O. Davis. The other things we collect here are days in training, organizational activities, mission reports, cultural artifacts like Cadet John Sloan Taft's poem reflecting on his time at Tuskegee. These are all the things plus more that are comprised in these histories that we receive at the Air Force Historical Research Agency. And these policies and procedures or whatever have stood the test of time. So historical inquiries, supporting historical inquiries is a key component of our work. We receive inquiries from across a wide spectrum, from the DAF, the general public, Congress. The map you see here is actually of it's from the 391st Bombardment Group in World War II. History showing their routes taking at Point du Hoc on D-Day, Normandy, France during World War II. This was some of the type of information we provided to senior leader who was giving a speech at Point du Hoc in France on D-Day's anniversary, 6 June 1944. So how did we come to be as an entity? So a lot of it stems from lessons learned from World War I, where there was no real formal policy or entity collecting and preserving documentation. So a substantial portion of the World War II documents, World War I documents that were out there, they were lost. Basically, a lot of them were lost, specifically as it applies to air. So miraculously, it was in 1942 that those records found their way to the Army War College and subsequently find their way to the Air Force Historical Division in Washington, D.C. So in 1942, we get this letter from President Roosevelt actually engages the director of the Bureau of the Budget, basically saying, hey, you know what, it would be a really good idea that the military had a history program to where they're tracking all these things that are going on. So in 1942, that process began. And then in 1949, after World War II, the collections that were at Washington, D.C. were moved to the Air Force Historical Research Agency at Maxwell. So on 26 September 2024, we celebrated our 75th anniversary at Maxwell. So today, as I mentioned before, AFHRA contains about 369 million pages of paper documents, histories produced from the field that we preserve. I will tell you that's probably about 74,000 linear feet of paper. And this is actually the letter from Franklin Roosevelt to the director of the budget. And the one thing that I want to point out to you is what I figure is the main gist of this is its main objective of preserving for those who come after us an accurate account of our present experience. And we still hold to that today. It's very significant. Again, this is the reason why we have these history programs. So I'm foot stomping here a little bit, but we safeguard the rich history of the Air Force and Space Force, ensuring that the studies and achievements of the past are meticulously documented and preserved for future generations. What I will point out here to you, really, I'm giving him a shout out, that's then Staff Sergeant Sam Sheeran, who was working at the agency back in the day, who now is Mr. Sheeran, and he's one of our emblem experts at the agency. So he's still there. So what does AFHRA preserve? Well, basically anything of historical significance in the Air Force and the Space Force. Our oldest collection is of Frank Pelham from about 1906. This is where we start our collection, pre-World War I. I asked for a box out of this collection the other day. Actually, it was last week, preparing for this brief. Brought it down to me, and I said, well, I'm going to give it 5 or 10 minutes just to glance through it. It was 3 hours later that I came out of this box. Honestly, it's the one thing is, put a historian at the archive. It's like a kid in a candy store. I just get into this stuff and I can't get out. It was mesmerizing. We're talking about some facts here. He's one of the first aviators for the United States. He was trained by the Wright brothers. He had a close personal relationship with the Wright brothers. He set a world record at the time with overwrite for basically two-person sortie, and 1 hour and 12 minutes or whatever that was, world record holder. So in this box were his diaries, his letters, photos. I was captivated by a 7x9 negative of a photograph he took of his balloon. He was a balloonist before he became a pilot. He got that love for flying from his father, who was born in 1847, pre-Civil War, who became a balloonist while he was living in France. So we're drawing these connective tissues across the board of how do we go from a father pre-Civil War to a son who was born just after the Civil War, and they have a love for flying. This is what you get out of these boxes. Again, you get lost. One of the things I found, I knew this ahead of time, but I came across a story about Leo III and Una, the North Alabama Lions that they had up at the university. And I immediately brought my attention to a story that I knew from the Lafayette Escadrille from World War I. The Lafayette Escadrille, one of the premier flying units for American aviators before America came into the war, flying for the French Lafayette Escadrille. You would think that with the excitement that they got from air-to-air battle, anti-aircraft fire, weapons malfunctions, poison gas, that they had enough excitement in their life, but they decided when they were on Liberty in Paris to pick up two lion cubs to bring back to be their mascots. And you would think with all the stuff that they dealt with, this is Raoul Lofberry. He was an American ace flying with the Lafayette Escadrille. And then the Lions took an exceptional liking to him. But with all the things that they faced, the one thing that the Lions did, they got him booted out of camp, was they ate his hat. So it's like, I can go against German aces or whatever, but just don't eat my hat. But anyway, as the Lions grew, they actually brought them back to the Paris Zoo. But it just makes you think a little bit. Could you see that happening today? So that context is there, and you just shake your head, go, that's just, it sounds crazy, but that's what they did. And I'm moving quick, so you'll probably have a lot of times for questions for me. One of the things that we do at the agency that we're solely responsible for is for all the lineage and honors for every Air Force unit, Space Force unit that exists or has existed. Roughly, we have about 14,000 on file. About 3,400 of those are active. And what these lineage and honor statements are, they're basically about a 1 to 4 page bio of each unit. Where they've been, what weapon systems are assigned, awards earned, honors earned. We track all that at the agency. It's what we do. I mean, we do every day. We have an organizational history branch upstairs that does this stuff daily. The other thing that we do, and it's one of those very emotional, very neat kind of things. I mean, I can tell you Air Force emblems and patches mean a lot. We are also responsible for all Air Force heraldry and emblems for the Air Force and the Space Force. What I can tell you is that everything that they do, everything designed, comes through us, processed through the Institute of Heraldry as part of the Army. But all our things, you see, I have Richard the Lionheart's 12th century lineage and honors sealed there. Our emblem program is modeled after that from the 12th century. All our emblems are unique. No unit has the same. What I have up here are some of the more iconic ones that we have. You have the Hat and Ring Squadron up there. That's a fighter squadron out at Langley, but it dates to World War I. Then we have a lot of Walt Disney emblems that were created during World War II. Not only was Walt Disney creating emblems for the Army Air Forces, but so was the Warner Brothers. Milton Caniff, if you can remember the cartoon ship Terry and the Pirates, he developed some of those emblems as well. One of those emblems actually is with the 353rd Special Operations Wing at Kadena Air Force Base in Japan. It's the Bat Cat is what they call it. That was designed by Milton Caniff. And all of them have their own stories. I'm going to get to Fifanella here in a minute. The one I really liked, and I'll bring your attention to that, is the question mark. And again, most of these emblems have unique stories. This particular one I'm very well aware of. This is the emblem of the 319th Troop Carrier Squadron in World War II. And you think to yourself, why a question mark? Well, when the 319th Troop Carrier Squadron was part of the 1st Air Commando Group, which was a kind of a clandestine organization put together to do rapid deployment to China, Burma, India in World War II. It was an all-volunteer force. Colonels Johnny Allison and Phil Cochran led it. It was all volunteer force, and when they were doing the recruitment for this force, roughly 500 strong people, they would go to places like this and they're recruiting for this, and their speech typically was, well, we can't tell you what you're going to do. We can't tell you where you're going. We can't tell you when you're going to come back. We just can't tell you. We can't tell you. Well, some ingenious crew chief or whatever decided, well, since you can't tell us anything, we'll just put a question mark on our patch. So that's where that came from. Getting to the Fifanella emblem, which is also Walt Disney. We worked with the Women's Army Service Pilots, WASP, Wings Over America organization. They needed to find a home for their collection, and we volunteered to take it also with the concordance with the National Museum. So what we did was brought in their artifacts. So we got a lot of their things that we are preserving in our unclassified reading room. So if you were to come to visit the Air Force Historical Research Agency and doing research, you will sit in this room. And to me, it's really amazing. We have, I can't use my pointers, but it hurts my neck. Turn that way. So what we have here is we've got their replica of their Congressional Gold Medal that they were awarded in 2009. We have Diane Parrish, her Class A uniform. We've got the bomber jackets. We've got the headsets that they wore. We have the replica PT-17 that you see in the background. That was custom made for them for that exhibit. The other thing that you'll notice is here and here, these are documents we pulled out of our WASP collection and recreated to create these decals. So we're actually putting some of those archival things to use. So if you get the chance to visit the agency and doing some research, this is where you'll be, and you'll be surrounded by this unique history of of the WASPs. One of the other things that we're charged with doing, we are the sole keepers of the Air Force victory credits. And when you look at this, I'll point you to the pilot there. Typically, that's what people will associate with aerial victory credits. You'll see it on a fighter aircraft. You'll see the swastikas or that stuff from World War II. And immediately you think, well, that's how many aircraft he shot down. That's what you see. But for us, there's a lot that goes into that. Every aerial victory credit is awarded via an order. So a special order that you receive. So we are the keepers of all the things that are official. We update the list. This is an example of a list of the aerial victory credits. Our aerial victory credit collection goes from World War I to present. We can trace, Eddie Reckenbacher's 26 aerial victories all the way up to the present. What you see here in the middle is the 354th Fighter Group, 11 aces. They had 11 aces during World War II. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. But as you can see, I think during World War II alone, we awarded over 15,000 aerial victory credits, which is a lot. And we have that list. So it's, you think you're going your grocery list is long, this is even longer. But I want to get to this picture here because this is one of these examples of where the picture doesn't tell everything. You look at that and you see these are all the 11 aces, and we marvel at the 11 aces. But what it doesn't tell you is that the 127 aircraft that they destroyed over the skies of Germany. What it doesn't tell you is that the weekly losses of comrades that they experience weekly. It doesn't tell you the pictures hidden stories about resiliency and camaraderie. You know, flying daily missions into one of the most inhospitable flying environments over Germany on a daily basis. That took a lot. And losing comrades weekly, yet still doing what was needed to accomplish the mission. These are some of the things that we have in these histories that we receive. Supporting the warfighter. Again, that's our primary job. That's what we do. And we look at this and we have oversized map collections you can see in the upper corner there that they use for strategic planning or whatever they need them for. You know, sometimes the research that we're supporting for the warfighter is not official, really. It's personal. I bring your attention to General Minahan up. Oh, I backed up. General Minahan, who was the former commander of Air Force Air Mobility Command, Scott Air Force Base, he had come to the agency to do research from World War II. And what we were looking for was his grandfather was a B-17 pilot in World War II. He also had uncles and cousins that were B-17 pilots in World War II. So through that research, not only were we able to help find information about his grandfather's unit, we were also able to pull mission reports that were handwritten by his grandfather and signed by his grandfather. That was a very emotional thank you. Like, oh my gosh. So there's those connections that we have. And you're talking about a family that's got a deep tradition of service in the military. Grandfather, father, brothers. We also hosted General Brown, who was then Chief of Staff General Brown of the Air Force, for a few hours at the agency, and he was doing a lot of research for Tuskegee Airmen and integration in the services. The other things that we actually do, we are responsible for oral history program in the Air Force. And we do oral histories frequently. We have a collection of the oral histories. And then that last picture here, that's William Symington IV. We had him on a visit at the agency and did oral history interviews with him. His connection to the Air Force is that his father, William Symington I, was the first Secretary of the Air Force. So we were able, through those oral history interviews, to get information about his great-grandfather, actually, that helped, you know, fill our collection we have on William Symington. We also leverage our collections to support veterans. We do a lot of this. We actually have a VA presence within the agency, so they have direct access to our records. Now, I will caveat that is that we do not possess personnel records at the agency. What we have is the histories, either from World War II, Vietnam, and forward. What we're able to do a lot of times is to be able to associate a unit of assignment, deployed locations. So when the veterans through the VA are filing claims, we're able to help support those. We support, it's a daily thing. We get VA requests all day, every day. Some of the unique aspects here I want to point out is Mr. Bill Becker, and this gets back into the oral history stuff. Mr. Bill Becker was a 18-year-old gunner on a B-25 for the 492nd Bombardment Group during World War II. I know Mr. Becker fairly well. And some of the stories that he relates that help build our stories. One that he talked to me about that just really made me laugh. He would fly all these missions. He would tell me about how strenuous they were and how scary they were. But they'd always get back to the chow hall and they would eat, but they always had powdered milk there. And nobody liked the powdered milk. So one day he says, I came back from a mission. I was over Germany doing clandestine ops. And we get back and we notice we had ice cream. And he's like, we don't have any refrigeration. Where do we get ice cream from? I said, well, where'd you get it from? He says, well, I found out that what they were doing was they were taking the powdered milk, putting it in B-25s, flying up at altitude, and bringing it back down as frozen. So those are the kind of stories that we have that live with us, and those are the ones that we want to protect and preserve. They're actually phenomenal. Where are we? I am moving really fast. So supporting to the public. In the calendar year 2024, and we're not done yet, we've had over 4,000 research inquiries, 7,500 microfilm orders, 350 official and unofficial visitors. You can read all the stuff. We do a lot. We support a lot. We do a lot of research. Some of the more high profile things that we've done. We did about 2 years effort of supporting Masters of the Air, if y'all watched that on Apple television. We literally leveraged our complete 100 bomb group history collections to help inform them on things such as crew life, the psychology of flying in those operations, missions that they flew, what life was at Thorpe Abbott's, which is where the 100th Bomb Group was located at. We also supported the Kansas City Chiefs and the NFL when they were doing honoring Captain Robert Thomas, who was a B-52 co-pilot that was shot down and lost over North Vietnam. Captain Robert Thomas' son was All-American linebacker for the University of Alabama, Derek Thomas, who went on to play for the Kansas City Chiefs and become an All-Pro. So we were able to help the NFL with that. We also put together some things for the NFL on one of their Super Bowl blurbs on just service, for the Air Force service. One of the other things that we've done a little closer to home is that our support to the real red tails with the National Geographic. We were able to identify photographs as well as accident report for Frank H. Moody. So this product can be viewed at National Geographic, Hulu, and Disney Plus if you haven't seen it yet. And lastly, one of the things, this was just recently, we got a public request for information on a C-46 crash in Okinawa in 1945. We were able to leverage our, let's go ahead to the next slide. We were able to leverage our Air Force record card collection to identify that C-46 and combine it with our accident report cards that we have, another collection, and be able to identify the C-46 and who was on it. It was actually 29 personnel that were lost in that crash, and we were able to get them they were able to use that information to get them Purple Hearts. 5 of those Purple Hearts were awarded in May of 2024 in Pearl Harbor. I'm looking around for Dr. Colvin to see if I'm on time or too early. We're good to go? Okay. So before so I'm going to summarize this real quick, and then I'm going to do a plug. In summarizing this, I've given you an overview of the agency's mission and touch on our collections, Air Force and Space Force histories, personal collections such as the Alam collection, our heritage, lineage, and honors, aircraft records, oral history collections, and special collections, which are topic related. As it is with the Alabama State Archives, our Department of Air Force stories live with us. They are simply priceless and worthy of our absolute best efforts to preserve and share. Before I open it up to questions, I want to do a plug for our journal. The second edition of our Air and Space Reflections Journal just went public. I invite you to take a look. The journal's focus is to use our collections to bring unique, relevant topics to the forefront. For this issue of Air and Space Reflections Journal, our very own Miss Paige Vaughn, who is here today, wrote an article about an Alabama-born aviator, Marjorie Stinson. Born in Fort Payne, Alabama, Marjorie Stinson, just like her more famous sister Catherine, would go on to be an early pathfinder for aviation history. Marjorie Stinson has a special place in the agency's collection where we can trace Marjorie's unending efforts to serve her country to become the first female military pilot. She was also an instructor to some of the earliest American military pilots, and she is the definition of service before self. We look forward to hearing your feedback on this important Alabama aviator as detailed in the latest issue of Air and Space Reflections. So with that, do we have any questions?
Thank you so much. And if you are watching online, if you have a question, just feel free to put it in the comments and it'll come to my phone. I can ask it on your behalf. But does anyone here in the audience have a question? Yes.
Hi, thank you for that wonderful presentation. I'm wondering what the process is if we want to come and do research. So who do we have to talk to? How do we get through security,
Sure.
et cetera?
Do you want to take that, Melissa? Or it works through research. Melissa Leahy is our chief research person. She can tell you, but we can make that happen.
So basically, in order to, you have two options, really. The AFHRA.news@us.af.mil. You can actually submit your request to us, and my research team will go through the process of figuring out what the scope is of what you would like, and then we can turn the request back to you, and hopefully we'll find something in the archive that pertains to your question. And then being mindful with the public that it's always going to have to be unclassified and clearly releasable. The second option for an actual visit, again, you will submit a request to AFHRA.news, and my circulation team has a whole packet that they send out, how you get through security and how you can get into the building. And we set aside space for you in our unclassified reading room. And if you know beforehand the unit history that you want to look at, that's always helpful when you submit your request, because then at that point we can actually have those pulled and waiting for you when you actually come. But Mr. Jackson, he is my circulation lead, and he is the one that's going to coordinate all the visit downstairs in our public area. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, and what are the hours of operation?
We are open to the public Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 5:30, or I'm sorry, 4:30. And then depending on if the base has a family day, we're closed on federal holidays. And if the base has a family day, like let's say the Friday before Columbus Day on a Monday, then the reading rooms are closed that day as well. So, all right.
Are there similar agencies for other military parts of the United States? I mean, like the Navy, the Army, and if there are, where are they located?
You have the Center for Military History, which is the Army, and then you have the Navy History Department. I'm not exactly sure where the Navy's located. The Center for Military History, if I'm not mistaken, is in Washington, D.C. So that they do exist. They do have them. We're not all configured the same, but you'll find what you're looking for, I'm sure. Yes, sir.
Just had a question about the freedom of information and congressional inquiries. How do you handle what is the procedure as far as dealing with the ramifications of either legal or policy decisions when you're doing research?
Well, one of my FOIA persons is here. Melissa, do you want to take that one?
Okay, so basically, we have two routes that come in. We have the litigation side that will come from the Department of Justice, and what they'll do is they'll actually give us a list of materials that they would like, our parameters, search parameters they want us to go off of, and we search everything, and then we return to them basically the list and all the documents that they're needing. When it comes to FOIAs and congressionals, usually how that's handled is half will send us the congressional. We look for whatever the material is. We do a thorough search from the unit history. A lot of times the congressionals and the FOIAs are actually driven from VA claims. perhaps someone felt that they did not get enough information the last time through a public request, and so now they're coming in through proper channels or through more official channels. And those are priority 1 requests, but whether it's a priority 1 request, which is the highest official one that you can have, or whether it's a priority 3 request, which is general public, we treat all of them the same as far as doing our due diligence in this search. Many of us are veterans at the agency, and so we are constantly doing whatever we can to help the veterans with their claims. So when you say, I guess I'm trying to narrow the scope of your question as far as the legality, the way that it comes through on the eFOIA system, because I'm the FOIA manager, the way that it comes through is it populates, we pull the request, and it's very important to note that we are not the original classifying authority for any of the documents, most of the documents, except for the interviews that we actually produce. Most of the documents, I would say 95% of what's in our collection, belongs to another agency. It could belong to Air Combat Command or Air Force Global Strike Command. And so when those requests come in, if it's an unclassified request, we try to treat it like an archival request and return it back quickly to the patron. If it is a classified request, that's when we actually transfer it to the agency that we identify that it belongs to. And it works its way through that system. And unfortunately, we don't always know if it's going to be declassified or if the review will come back, but we do everything we can to find the document and the primary source for the request. I hope that answers what you're asking. Okay.
We have an online question about the unit emblems, and if you know if there is an extensive history available on the myriad of unit emblems available, and where they might find that.
Okay, so the emblems are on our organizational history on our AFHRA webpage, because they can go to organizational history and they can track whether they're looking for a squadron, wing, numbered Air Force. If it's active, it'll be there. If it's inactive, then they would have to submit a request and we can find the information for them. And oh, by the way, since we're just on emblems, and I'll get to your question, I literally brought samples of Walt Disney emblems up here. So if you decide you want to come up and take a look, you're more than welcome to. I'd also bring your attention to our Space Force emblems and patches. They're a little bit different. These are actually made of PVC, which is what Space Force has gone to. They're really unique. You can get more detail out of those. So you're more than welcome. I got a few Disney and a few others that are up here that we just happen to have. We normally don't keep patches. We keep the artwork. But you're more than welcome to come up and look.
I was in a unit which was disbanded, and their instructions were to gather as many artifacts, precious artifacts, as were then available, put them into a trunk, and that would go to some depository. Are you the depository for these trunks, or how is that treated? Is it still around? Or?
It probably is. So when they put what you're talking now is a heritage trunk. Those items that are put into that, whether they're more like 3D, what they call three-dimensional art, it's basically uniforms or plaques and that kind of stuff. That stuff goes to the National Museum of the United States Air Force. If they submitted it to the National Museum of the United States Air Force, it is still there. So that's where it would have gone.
What was the name of the place?
The National Museum of the United States Air Force, Wright-Patterson.
Okay.
Please join me in thanking Mr. Brown again for a wonderful presentation. Thank you for joining us. And thank you all for coming. I hope to see you next week. If you have questions about next week's programs, please let me know. And I hope to see you again next month, November 21st, with Jamie Reeves talks about Alabama composers. Thank you.
I wanted to go